What's going on YouTube? Welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to be relocating the ABS unit behind the driver's side fender. So we're going to show you the steps and the needed tools to do so. These are some of the tools that I used for this ABS relocation. So first things, I got drill bits. The biggest I used was a 3/8. That was to drill the hole into the firewall, also for my rib nuts. I got the solder wire connectors, heat shrink, and these rubber cushioned clamps that I fasten my brake lines with. A drill. I got a 3/8 cordless impact I was using here and there. Torch for the heat shrink. This is a trim panel tool, of course some electrical tape. These are the trim clip pliers, a pair of wire strippers, wire crimpers, some sockets, a 3/8 drive ratchet, and then to mount the new lines, the Rywire lines, the fittings I noticed were standard. So we used a 5/8 for these fittings right here to bolt into the actual unit. I'm sorry, it's not 5/8. Correction, it's a 9/16. And then a 13mm for this to screw onto this. This is just a nipple, threaded nipple, and then the line just screws onto it. So this is a 13, this is a 9/16. And then for all the fittings, the black fittings that came with the kit, there's a little lock nut on it, like up here. I don't know if you can see that, but that is a little bigger, and that's a 5/8. So yeah, just to wrap it up, I mean, just simple stuff needed, nothing too crazy. These 3 boxes I bought off Amazon, fairly cheap. There's 2 8mm, in my case, these were 8mm screws that were in these 2 locations. So I removed them. I had my front tabs bent, so I didn't even have clips in here, but for those of you that haven't rolled the front fenders or the front tab, you'll have clips in 1, 2, 3, 4 locations. So in my case, I don't have any clips there, so I don't need to worry about that. But these are going to be 3 10mm bolts that you're gonna have to remove to get the fender off, and there's gonna be 5 10mm bolts in the engine bay. So one right here, right there. In my case, I had a hood strut piece right there, so I gotta remove that hood strut to get that piece off, and then another one right here. And on the bottom side, there's going to be 3 10mm, one right here, and right there. So these are the 10mm bolts that came off. And then lastly, there's going to be 2 10mm bolts behind the door. So I don't know if you can see that one. You get a better look over here. So right there, and I would use like a ratcheting 10mm wrench for that one, and then there's gonna be one more right down there, and I would use an extension, maybe like a 6-inch extension or longer, with a 10mm socket on that. And once you get the 5 up in the engine bay, the 2 in the door jamb, and then the 3 on the bottom, as well as the fender clips and or bolts, then the fender should be ready to come off. So I'm gonna go ahead and start removing the rest of the bolts and get the fender off. I also wanted to mention, which I didn't mention earlier, is you want to remove the side marker. So what you want to do is push it towards the front end of the car, and then as you push, you're gonna kind of pull it away from the fender. So let's go ahead and do that. Alright, and that's how it comes out. So the reason why I say you push, because this plastic retaining clip pushes up against this, and you pry it on out from the back side. You slide the back end first, push this in and lock in place. That's to install the side marker. In this case, we're taking the fender off, we're going to remove the side marker. And all you want to do is turn this counterclockwise and wiggle this out. There you go. You can just slide this in the fender because the wiring harness is just going to stay there. So put your side marker aside so you don't lose it or damage it. Alright, so I got the fender off. Just make sure you keep all your hardware for reinstallation so you don't lose anything. I just put the bolts where they came from, just screwed them back in, so I know, and I don't lose them. Pretty much going to be moving the ABS unit from this location, and I got the Rywire ABS relocation kit, so came with all new lines. I'm gonna run the harness through that hole, and the unit's gonna be mounted somewhere in this location. Probably gonna have to move this out the way. Yeah, let's get started on removing the hydraulic unit. I'm just gonna take off all the hard lines. Now make sure you mark, I'm gonna use painter's tape to mark each line so I know where they go and where to put the new line. I would use a flare nut wrench tool to get them off. Alright, so this is the Rywire kit. Comes with their stainless braided lines, brake lines. So you want to start labeling and tracking where brake lines go, and I would take pictures so you don't, just in case you forget, you can refer back to your picture. Taking apart the hard lines so we can actually move the unit into the wheel well and get that mounted up, and then once that's mounted, then we can start figuring out what lines go where, and yeah, show you what we got. Alright, so in the midst of this, I ended up having to take off the passenger side fender, and I took off the wheel well liners just to make it easier. As you can see, we'll show you later on where we're gonna have to drill holes for the passenger front brake line, but got all the hard lines disconnected from the unit, and now I'm gonna unbolt the actual unit, and there's 3 10mm bolts. One right down here, another one down there, and the third one is right here. So get those 3 10mm unbolted and you'll be able to move this unit out the way. Alright, so we got the ABS unit out the way. I still have the hard lines there. I'm keeping them there until I'm ready to route all the lines. So I mocked up the bracket right here. This is the original ABS bracket, and I had to cut off the 3rd ear right here so it'll clear, otherwise it was sticking out and it would hit the fender. So I hammered these 2 tabs to the vehicle. So as you can see, this one's a little twisted. Well, this isn't 100% fastened yet. I just self-tap screws I'm going to be putting rib nuts in, and then we'll mount the unit up. So far this is, I guess, the hardest part of this installation. This is the line that goes to the passenger front brake line. So what it is, you had to drill a hole, and it's a 90, and it goes through the firewall, and I'll show you how I have it routed here. Padding right here, and I don't know if you can see that fitting, but it's a 90 and it bolts to the line right there. And this is the line, and it's routed up over the steering column, through behind the pedal, and then through behind the dash here, on over to the passenger side. And as you can see, this is the rest of the line. I routed it up under this AC drain tube, and it, as you can see, this is where it goes through the firewall onto the passenger side. So this is another 90, and I'll show you. And it was easier for me to take this cover off. There's a Phillips head that screws in right here, and I was able to get the line and fish it to where I needed to. The other fitting, so I had to use 2 washers on the passenger side for it to fill the gap, and then I used 1 washer. But as you can see, that's the hardest part of running it through the cab. And then all it is there's another part of the kit here, and this connects there, and this goes to the brake line right down here. So, and I have some fasteners to fasten the brake lines to the body, and I'll show you that when I get to it. So, as I mentioned, I was gonna use rib nuts. So these are 1/4 inch rib nuts. Uses a standard 1/4 inch bolt. So this is so I just did 1 for the bracket. I used a 3/8 drill bit to drill a hole so the rib nut can sit right in there, and then I'm going to use the bolt to tighten down the bracket. So we're going to go ahead and install this other rib nut and bolt the bracket up. So I got the ABS unit mounted, as you can see here. I use the rib nuts and bolts to fasten the bracket down. I got all the lines connected. So this is kind of how I did it. So right here, just want to explain. So this is exactly how the unit sat in the OEM location. So I labeled every single one of these before I took it out from the original location and the hard lines. So this one and this one, these both go to the brake master cylinder. So I labeled them 1 and 2. You can see this is 1, and then number 2 is the one further closest to the firewall. So number 1 would go here. Number 2 would go here. So I had to drill holes into the frame, and I used the fittings that Rywire supplied in the kit. And if you can see here, that's where they come out and they go to the unit. Now This one is number 3. Well, how I labeled it, number 3, which is the driver front brake line. And then, as you can see, it routes all the way along the frame. I used a little Rivnut and a bolt fastener to hold that in, and it just goes to the brake line right there. And number 4 and 5, which be number 4 and 5, these both go to the proportioning valve. So number 4 actually goes to the furthest point on the valve, and number 5 is going to be the next one over. So let me see if I can show you. So number 4 would route right here. This is number 4, and number 5 is right there. So, and it just runs underneath, up like so, and into the 2 middle spots on the unit. And then number 6, which is the last one, is the right front brake line, which runs through the firewall, that fitting right there, and under the dash, over to the passenger side, and out. In the same location, you had to drill 2 holes, and comes out there. I use another fastener with a bolt and a Rivnut, and then the brake line that you can see right there. So everything's secured and everything's tight, bolted up. So